All right, everybody, we are going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we got a nice little crowd. I want to thank you for joining us for the 2024 Black and Data Week. My name is Kimberly Deas. I am the founder of BlackTIDES Data. I am also the informatics lead and executive director. I will be doing a talk on how to pivot into data from a non-accounting or software engineering background. I'm a scientist by training. I'm also a senior data scientist, recently got a teeny tiny bit of a promotion there. Informaticist, my PhD is in healthcare informatics, and I'm doing it on looking at health disparities among Black women living with HIV. I also recently started a little part-time fellowship in cancer because eventually I'd like to pivot into cancer research as part of my postdoc aspirations. And with that little minor background, I'm going to go ahead and get everything started. Welcome again. Thank you for joining us. All right, so again, this is Data Careers After 40, Kimberly Deas, MS PhD candidate. So Data Careers After 40, I'm going to talk about how to prepare, what your educational options are. Then I'm going to share a little bit about my path to data analytics. So hopefully it won't take you guys as long as I did. I started in 2013. It took me actually only 2 years to get my first data position, which was great, but I can't count the number of applications it took me to get there, but we're here. I'll talk about some of the advantages and challenges. Lots of advantages, obviously. Sherry just covered a number of those. I'm going to talk to you about advantages, specifically around ageism. It is real. Nothing we can do about it, but I'm the queen of the workaround, so I'll share some of my workarounds. Then we'll talk about breadth versus depth in terms of SME in terms of how you should focus and concentrate in data. These days, I think it's important to have a specialty area. So for me, that area would be healthcare data analytics. Others may be sports analytics, education. I mean, there's all different fields now are tracking data. So having expertise in a specific area can help you land a job. All right, so how do we prepare? So everybody's familiar with MOOCs, Udemy, Coursera, edX. Former courses, let me just state on the onset, a $20,000 boot camp is not necessary, but I won't rule out boot camps completely. So there's one by an organization called Correlation for One. They have an excellent boot camp for data professionals. I used to work as a TA there. It is a phenomenally well put together program of preparing future data professionals. So I would suggest that one, and it's free. I don't know if I mentioned that part. At least it used to be. I'm pretty sure it probably still is. I did mention MOOCs. I'm actually taking one now in Udemy. I've switched to a data scientist position at my current organization. I'm charged with creating a database. I decided, hey, why don't I push myself instead of doing the old SQL stuff, which is great. But SQL isn't really great for the type of data that I tend to curate, which is chemistry. I work at a pharmaceutical organization called United States Pharmacopoeia. And so we work with the FDA to make sure our drugs are safe. So anyway, I need to create a database. I decided to look for a course on Neo4j, which is a graph database. It's also non-SQL, so it basically differs in how it relates the data to each other, which again, tables that the typical structure of SQL was a little restrictive for the type of analysis that I need to do. There are also certifications that you can do to prepare for data career. I will tell you that these are very low value. And I think the reason they're low value is because people will often complete certifications and then have nothing else to show for their data experience. There's nothing wrong with certifications in and of themselves, but if you don't have that backed up with a portfolio, then it's pretty meaningless, especially if you're trying to break in. And that's why I emphasize on this last one, how to prepare. Create a portfolio stat, like literally get off of this, after we're done here, go to GitHub, go to Excel, go to Python, whatever language you know. And if you don't know a language, pretty much everybody should know Excel at this point. You can basically create a simple portfolio that you can show some of your work. So what can you do in Excel? You can show data analysis, data cleaning, data visualization. You can actually do machine learning in Excel as well. So not the Excel that I grew up with, but certainly there's no excuse for getting at least something together to show that you know how to do data and that you have a skill set that is valuable in the market. All right, so everyone has a lot of different courses and trainings that they consider core. So this, take it with a grain of salt, whatever you need. This may vary from person to person. Hopefully this is legible. If not, these slides and the video will be available at a future date. We'll need some time to get our video together, obviously to do editing and whatnot. let me get back to the subject. Okay, so first you need to have statistics. I think that's basic. I know a lot of people that don't have it. So when they're doing things like confidence intervals, it's one thing to understand programmatically how to, code for, confidence interval, but do you really know what it means? So that's why I'm old school, get the fundamentals and then learn how to do it in code. So statistics, medical statistics, if you're in healthcare informatics. Can someone give me a thumbs up if this is legible? I'm not having a problem reading it, but I just want to make sure it's okay for everybody else. Everybody can read this on screen, okay?
It looks good.
Great, fantastic. Moving on. Okay, so I did talk about database. Don't diss the SQL, right? So for example, I worked in a hospital. They use Epic as the electronic health record. Epic tables are in SQL, so it's obviously a very useful skill. But NoSQL, Mongo, Neo4j are some great options too. The bottom line is that you need to know how to manipulate data from a database. So for the most part, databases aren't really for manipulation, although you can do some things like say if you don't need the 100 columns that came with the data set. Maybe you only need 10. So you can literally write code in SQL to get the 10 columns and then do the cleanup and analysis in another language like Excel or Python or R. But you absolutely need to know how to deal with a database because everywhere I've ever worked, data is kept in a database. So just some basic fundamentals of databases. Statistical programming languages. So this is for DA stands for data analyst, DS stands for data scientist, Excel, Excel, Excel. I cannot tell you how often I see machine learning engineers who know very little about the capabilities of Excel. Every place I've ever worked, pretty much every organization keeps their data in Excel spreadsheets. Some of them, unfortunately, use them as a database. Now, if you've got just 100 rows, maybe 10 columns, that's one thing. Anything bigger than that, then you're going to want to graduate to a database like SQL, which is SQL. Other programming languages, SAS or SPSS. SPSS, I think, is a great introductory programming language to more difficult, challenging languages like SAS, R, and Python. It's very commonly used in healthcare and epidemiology. Like I said, it's very simple to use compared to others. So if you're, new to this and you're not really wanting to jump in R, SAS, or Python, and you don't have to, I would strongly suggest SPSS. The downside, of course, is that it requires a license, if I'm not mistaken, but if you're a student, you can get a discount on that. So that's a real good introductory programming language until you're ready for something like SAS, R, or Python. R and Python, next line, typically used in industry, also becoming more prevalent in healthcare and in scientific spaces. So when people ask me, well, what language should I use? And I say, well, it depends on the job. So I literally had a span of about 4 years where every job I use a different language. So the first one might've been R, the second one was Python, the third one was Tableau, the fourth one was SAS. So literally every year that I was getting laid off, I switched to a new job and I had to learn a new language. So what I always tell people is learn the language that's appropriate for the environment that you work in. That might be R, that might be Python, or the environment you aspire to work in. So if you want to go into healthcare, I would say learn SAS, SPSS. But Excel is the foundation for all of them. So even if you want to go into industry and work at Google, learn how to manipulate an Excel spreadsheet. All right, so for more data science, data engineering roles, you're going to learn things like machine learning, and advanced statistics will be a great course for that. So there are some data analysts, however, that do machine learning and advanced statistics. And one of the other things you're going to notice really quickly is that there's no uniformity to job descriptions. What I'm seeing a lot of, though, are job descriptions that look like things a data engineer would do, pull data out of the cloud and, move it from one cloud to another cloud, or, things like that. That sounds like engineering more than data scientists, but I'm seeing a lot of data scientist roles require those skills. So if data science is your goal, then you're probably going to want to learn a little bit of what data engineers do too, because the data has to come from somewhere. With that said, machine learning and advanced statistics are things that I personally did not do until I had more advanced roles. And finally, data visualization. Again, you can do visualization in Excel, R, and Python. So Excel is a start if you're new. Tableau and Power BI are more higher level, a higher bar for learning, although I think Tableau is a higher bar than Power BI, but they're both equally effective. Typically, people use those for dashboards. And then finally, Neo4j is a more advanced language that can be used to use data visualization. And I have it on the list because it's new and because I'm learning it now and thought I would share. Okay, so let's go through that again. Statistics, a database, statistical programming language, and then data visualization. That's going to be your core in order to transition to data analytics. And so with that, I'm going to take a break and see if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, got some shout outs for Neo4j. Yes. Small on a mobile. Yeah. Doing the best we can with that. I might put my auntie hat on, but you really should be looking at it on a computer or on a tablet at least to save your eyes. Okay, I can take my auntie hat off now. All right. Excel is the backbone of business. Absolutely correct there. Okay, let me move these messages out of the way here. Let's see, were there any questions in the chat, or does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask a question? Okay. All right, so this is the path that I took. It was a lot. Now, I was instructed when I was coming from a bench scientist to being a data scientist. I didn't have a PhD, and so that limited, job opportunity. But more than that, I wanted to be able to do something in real time. At that time, I thought I want to do cancer research and discover a cure for cancer. And then the more I got into it, worked at a couple of pharmaceutical companies in the lab. That didn't work out so great. And so I knew I needed to find something that better suit my integrity level. Yes, I went exactly there. But the bottom line is that I wanted to find a way to do science in real time for real-time impact. And data is the answer. So I was advised to start with Java. Now, that was like being baptized in a vat of fire, especially for someone who had no programming experience whatsoever. But what it did do was it gave me confidence that everything I ever learned after that wasn't nearly as challenging, because I started with what was at the time the hardest thing ever. Java it was really something. It literally took me a year to get through an 8-week course because I kept starting and stopping, basically starting and quitting and starting and quitting because it was that frustrating. But like I said, once I got through that class, everything else I did after that was just easy in comparison. Okay, so that was 2012, 2013. I started an online course. I actually enrolled in looks like I enrolled a graduate level Python course. I was at Georgetown at the time, working in a lab, and took a Python for informatics. And that was cool, but the way they taught it back then, it just wasn't clicking for me. I also got my first job, right? So I'm a scientist trying to get a position in data. And I've been analyzing data the whole time I'm a scientist, but we didn't call it that, right? It didn't really become a thing, right? Until the last maybe 10, 15, well, maybe 15, 20 years now. But when I was an intern, again, as my way to get into a data job, right? I learned a lot. I was able to leverage my background, but that was literally the best job that I could get. And let me just give you some numbers here. So this is 2012. I literally had to go back to my 2000 salary as an intern in order to set myself up for where I am today. So I want to pause for a second and talk about perseverance and tenacity. If you are changing from a career outside of data that doesn't really involve data, like I said, not like accounting or software engineering, it may be super difficult for you to transition, even if you've published papers and done all this data analytics. And I don't know why it's set up that way, but it just is. Like, it's a little bit of gatekeeping, but honestly, that's why BlackTIDES exists, to kind of help you work around those gates. What you're going to realize is that you may need to take several steps back in order to get to where you really want to be. Some people just aren't willing to do that. If you've been making 6 figures for a while, you might not want to go back to making $40,000 a year. And in today's economy, I totally get it. But what I can tell you is that it was the ability for me to say, okay, I'm making double this, I've been making double this amount of money as an intern, but in order for me to get my foot in the door, this is what I got to do. And at this point, I was willing to do whatever. So I took the internship. It actually worked out really great. I'm actually still in touch with my boss, who really, I kind of say in a lot of ways, triggered me in this path. Okay. All right. So then 2014 rolls around. So now I decide I need to kind of broaden my way of thinking, because again, the Python just isn't clicking. And I remember I used to submit my assignments and the professor would go, "You don't really seem to understand this well, but you always get the answer right." And he says, "What's going on?" I said, "I am tenacious. I would be up literally all night long trying to figure the coding out because it just wasn't clicking." I don't, as a scientist, we say a cat is a cat, right? We don't say a cat is equal to X. But it was in thinking about this mathematically that made a light bulb go off, right? So if you think about coding as math, right? In math and algebra, you say x is equal to 1, y is equal to 2, what's x plus y, right? Once I started to frame coding as math, now I understood it, because all this time I'm saying it's a cat. Why I just can't call it a cat, right? Or it's a dog. Like as a scientist, things are just, literal. You just calling it like you see it. But coding really is math. And that's probably why people who have a math background do so well when they switch over, right? If you think about it in terms of an assigning of something to mean something else, right? So again, so from a coding perspective, if I say X is equal to cat and Y is equal to dog, and then I say X, and then I describe this thing has fur. Do you say cat or do you say X? Well, you can say either one because they both mean the same thing. That was just really, really hard for me to understand. But once I started looking at it mathematically, a light bulb went off. And that would be about the time that I enrolled in this course called CS50, Intro to Computer Science. This course is offered through Harvard edX. If you can take this course and you are new, I strongly suggest you do. They go through a lot of fundamentals. Now, at that point, they were teaching a language called C++. Now, remember, I'm trying to be a data person, so I'm going through Java, I'm going through C++. Nowadays, you have a much more direct path to where you want to go. But back then, there wasn't all of these, boot camps and online courses and all of that. I was just trying to figure it out. Okay, so that class went really well. I enrolled in another course called Clinical Informatics. So at this point, I'm preparing to enter a PhD program. And so I did another internship that summer in biomedical informatics. And at that point, I'm going to do my PhD in chemical informatics. Unfortunately, situation didn't work for me that well with that department. It just wasn't the right school for me. Did well, straight A student, blew out all of my PhD rotations, but it just wasn't a mix. And so luckily I was able to transfer to Rutgers, and I'm 6 credits from graduating. So obviously that's worked out really well. Now, again, I'm in healthcare informatics. Thank you, AM Hurdle. Yeah, it's like math. That made it go off for everybody, right? When I said that to some other students, they were like, oh, yep, there it is. I got to think about it like math. Okay, so back to my path. Some other courses I took, again, I'm trying to focus in healthcare informatics. So I'm like, okay, let me get my background in medicine together. So I took statistics for medicine. I worked as a research data assistant at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. It was a great experience. I took bioinformatics 1 and 2 because at this point I'm still thinking data, but I'm thinking more bioinformatics data, right? So the next year is when I'm applying for jobs and applying for jobs. I finally get a job as a data professional. My data title was Outcomes Data Coordinator. So I'm working at a cancer department at a major hospital. But I still know that I want to ultimately be this data person. So I'm taking SQL. I took statistics for R. So again, health sciences focused because that's what I was, into. I'm working at a hospital, so I need to understand the language. So I took a course in ICD-9 and ICD-10. I think they're up to 12 now. And my job title at that point is data coordinator. So now I'm starting to make some decent money. So now I'm starting to see this thing is starting to pay off. But notice it took me, 3 years to get from where I started in 2012 to 2015, where I finally had a job that had data in it, because that's the key. So that's this thing in chemistry where the difference between, you have a solution, you have some crystals that are starting to form. That moment that those crystals start to form, then all of a sudden everything in the jar starts to form a crystal, right? So any chemist in the house will know what I'm talking about. Well, that's kind of what it is with data. Once you get a career or a job title that has data in it, it's just it's gonna be okay, right? So it may not, take off the way you want it to. Let me just be clear on that, right? Because nowadays I know people I was a person with a master's degree, working as a data coordinator. I had 2 master's degrees, and that was the best data job I could get, so I took it, right? Okay, so now 2016 starts to roll around and things are going a little different. I'm taking some more classes. I'm taking, again, these are mostly online classes. You notice that there are not a lot of classes that I took necessarily in school, except at this point now I'm a PhD student. So I learned healthcare databases, that was Access. I took these courses at a community college. So again, I'm in healthcare. I need to know, where different parts of the body are, right? Because I'm in a healthcare setting and there are multiple reasons why that's important. So I'm taking the disease processes and I'm taking medical terminology. So again, I'm trying to prepare myself to work in a healthcare setting so that I understand what the data is, right? So what I've noticed though, is a lot of, organizations, especially in healthcare, will have people who don't know the difference between a sacrum and a tibia. That could be important if the data set you're looking at is looking at bone cancer versus, cancer of the back or something like that. So anyway, my point is that when you decide that you want to focus in an area, really double down, because that'll help you have many more opportunities than you normally would have. All right, so now it's 2017 and I'm still a data analyst at this. Oh, I'm about to be promoted though. Okay, so I've taken SQL Server. I'm learning all the different versions of SQL because one of the other things I learned is some people like Postgres, some people like MS SQL Server. So there are different flavors of that. So they're not all the same. They're basically the same, but not quite. So now I'm having to take some other different classes. But now as part of my PhD program, I've taken MATLAB. Now that was a signature moment in my career because now I've learned machine learning. So my first exposure to machine learning was actually through a course called MATLAB. MATLAB is a course, a data programming course that engineering students normally take, right? I took it because it was a part of my program, but it was great because now I'd heard this thing called machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I'm like, okay, now I can really make some differences in some spaces that I want to work in. So now I start thinking about what I want to do for my dissertation project. And I knew automatically I wanted to be able to apply artificial intelligence, improve health outcomes of women living with HIV, because at this point, I'm a data analyst in an HIV clinic. So it all made sense. All right, so 2017, you can see some other different courses that I took there. I'm just going to skip down to 2019, 2020. So now I'm finally in my first data scientist position. So when you talk about how I got to where I am today, I'm a senior data scientist now. I literally had to take every step. I wasn't able to skip any steps. I couldn't go around the back and couldn't get nobody heist me up to a high level. I had to literally walk the path of every step. So I started off as an intern. Then I was a data assistant. Then I was a data coordinator, then a data analyst, then a senior data analyst, then a data scientist, and now a senior data scientist. Now, with that said, are there any things that I could have done to skip some steps? I don't know that I could have, only because I knew I wanted to get a PhD. That was kind of a really important thing for me. So the time I spent investing in taking PhD courses, if I had maybe spent that taking data courses, I might have could have got here sooner. But then I wouldn't be 6 credits from getting my PhD. So, it's pros and cons with everything. With that said, I want to work with students. I want to help other students get their PhD. So that's why I'm in this PhD program. I'm not doing it, for any other reason. Some people, have different motivations. That's my motivation. However, you don't need a PhD to be a senior level data scientist or a director or anything else. As a matter of fact, what you really need to be at those higher levels is great connections. So LinkedIn, go to BlackTIDES, this thing we're having this week, Black and Data Week, anything you can do to network. I think Render's going on in ATL this week. Network. That's going to really be the key to moving up. All right. So with that said, are there any questions? All right. So I'm going to just read some comments. Sherry says, Sherry, your presentation, let me tell you, I was taking notes. You learn how to be a great boss when you go through every step along the path because let me stop for a second and talk about this. Okay. One of the really great things about going through the path is that you know what's done at every level of the data continuum, right? So if I'm a director of data analytics, I know what the intern is doing. I know what the coordinator is doing. I know what the analyst is doing. I can't tell you how valuable that is. And actually, I can't tell you how, I'm going to try to find a real nice word here, how challenging it is when you work for someone who's done none of that. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you need to do all of those things to be a director or a vice president of data science or whatever. You don't. But if you don't, I'm not really sure how you know what the heck is going on. It's a question I ask myself on a regular basis. When you have gone through every level, you know what you're talking about. When you have not, and I'm going to just leave it there. So I believe in being over-prepared versus under-prepared. Actually, it's not even that I believe in that. I know that if I want to move in the workplace the way I want to move, I got to come in prepared, right? There's no tryouts or let's just see what happens in 90 days. No, I got to come in from day one knowing what I am doing, okay? Someone says that the bar is not the same for everybody. We don't all have the same bar. And rather than being mad about it, I just do what needs to be done. Life is too short to spend on being angry about things and people that you cannot control. But what you can control is what you're bringing to the table. So I say, come with as much as you can, because it's probably going to be required anyway. And that's just me keeping it real, especially as you get older, right? Okay. Oh, we got Sia. Hey, Sia. So Sia is our operations manager. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what I would do differently. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Because it looks like I got some inner. Let's see, can everybody see that? Is there something blocking what you guys are seeing? Okay, maybe that's just some, okay, never mind. What I would do differently today. So this is a picture of me voluntarily working at Georgetown because I'm waiting for the PI I work for to get funded again. I got my master's in pharmacology, got my master's in chemistry. I love working in a lab. Like it was a lot of fun. But I was pretty desperate to get out of the lab because of the lack of job opportunity and sitting around. I mean, who can do that? How am I supposed to eat? I mean, ramen noodles get old after a while. Okay, all right. So what I would have done then, what I would do different now is I would have worked to become intermediate and advanced level in Excel in that moment. That because there's so much you can do in Excel. The graphs, the pivot tables, all important. The other thing I would have learned, now this is me, I don't have any programming experience, right? Learn Access, because on the back end of Access, like the Microsoft Access is what I'm talking about, is SQL. So there's a tab where you can switch over when you make some commands in Access. There's a tab you can switch over, which will actually give you the code for SQL. So this is your little taste of SQL coming in. Now, the next thing, a whole lot of networking, tenacity, and job applications. I can't emphasize that. Mostly the networking, believe it or not, right? A lot of people, I don't know if you guys know, 80% of jobs are not advertised. So I don't know what the numbers are today, but it just seems like it's getting worse. So networking will always pay off. Okay. So at this point, with this advanced Excel, you can get, some lower level data positions. You could be a data, coordinator, data analyst if you're lucky. And then I show what the salary is. Now, after I have that skill set, now you want to add on some more statistics, some SQL, and maybe beginner R, Python, or SAS. Again, depending on what environment you want to tackle. Okay, so again, whole lot of networking. Might want to throw in some intro to Tableau and Power BI. I talked about those 4 critical elements of a data professional, data visualization being one. But remember, you can learn data visualization at step 1 because you have mastered Excel. Okay. So now at this level, you can get senior data analyst, data visualization specialist. These are all the different job titles I've seen with this set of, skill set and some of the salary information. Now, I don't know how accurate the salary information is anymore because everything is just all over the place. It looks to me. Yeah, but that 50 to 100,000, I mean, I have seen jobs that want a director of data science for $90,000 a year. So there's that. All right, so now let's say you really want to be a data engineer, you want to go into a higher level job, but now you need to add a higher level skill set. So you're going to talk about machine learning, you're going to talk about SQL, advanced SQL, Python, or SAS, and cloud computing. So that's doing things in Amazon's cloud and things like that. Again, more networking. The thing that I should probably add to the slide, though, is that project. You got to have a project portfolio. And again, if all your project is 10 slides of Excel of something that you put together, you've got a data set, you put it together. And when I say put it together, I mean, you do some basic analysis, you do some basic findings, and now you have ChatGPT. So you could literally put the data set in ChatGPT and tell me what comes back. Now, the trick about that is you better know how to explain it, right? So there's a difference between using ChatGPT to do a whole bunch of stuff for you, but if you don't know what it means, that's not going to be a good look. So make sure you understand what you're doing and what the analysis means, and even what you get back from ChatGPT. I use it almost every day, but I absolutely do not use it to do thinking for me, because at some point I'm going to be on the spot in front of somebody without a computer and have to explain something. So just make sure you know what you're talking about. Okay. So Jessica said bye to the director position at 90K. I agree, but if you're just starting out, again, sometimes you kind of got to take what you could get. I mean, I know that it's hard because you're working really hard, but I made a lot of sacrifices to get here, but it's paid off. So, okay, looking at some other, Jessica is so active. Thank you, Jessica. So MS Access is basically a single user database. So it's a good intro. Yes. No, please don't scale. Okay, let's bring this point up. Sometimes you will work for people, again, who might not know as much about data as their titles will indicate. And they're like, oh, I want to build a 30,000 row, 30 column database in Access. That's going to be a no. You really want to go to SQL. Okay. And like I said, I know Access is built on SQL, but I mean, the real SQL is what you want there. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. AM Hurdle adds that SQL can be used in Excel, Access, SAS, and Power BI. So now that has those extra links. I mean, I don't do that, but that's actually a good point. And a lot of these languages, though, you can use them in other things, right? So I can, when I'm using KNIME, for example, I can access practically everything from KNIME, Python, R. I actually don't know about SAS. Maybe you can access that too. I'm not sure. But there's a lot of interconnectedness between the different programming languages. So definitely keep that in mind. All right. And Sia wants to mention that family situations vary, excuse me, dependents change, right? So when I originally started on this path, I was married and had a family, had a kid. So yeah, you definitely have to consider your situation. But I guess I want to say that one class at a time, one project at a time is progress, okay? So it's not, you don't want to set yourself up in a position where you're racing to something, right? You really want to take your time. And if you can only take one class, take the one class and know that that's one step closer than you were before. Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay, so some of the advantages of being an older person. You have work experience and skills, and so people will tend to kind of lean on you to take a kind of a leadership role sometimes. Older people, again, typically have strong work ethics. This is just kind of what the statistics are saying. Don't shoot the messenger, tend to stay in jobs longer, take fewer days off. Now, again, I come from a generation where we kind of worked ourselves to death. We thought we could have it all. And then Generation Z is saying, no, ma'am, I'm taking my sick leave. I'm sick today, I'll be out. And actually, that's the way you really want to do it. Okay. Some other things that you may do as an older person in the data field is they'll, expect you to train next generation. Actually, this is something come up at my job where they're like, hey, can you share us with KNIME? I'm like, sure, for an additional $20,000 a year, I will do that. Okay. And then a lot of times that you'll assume mentoring roles, and that can be a good thing. And then of course, here's some list of articles here of why older people are good for business. So, again, we tend to stick to it, stay in jobs longer, fewer days off. No diss to Generation Z. Y'all do be kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I don't, on the level, I kind of don't blame you. If you over here, you're making 100,000, you can bounce over here and make 150, go for that. So I'm not mad. Okay. Ooh, what is this in here? Oh, wow, was I supposed to do how did this get in here? Looking at this ChatGPT example on how to improve your resume. Okay, so this will be something you guys can look at. I forgot I had this in here. So anyway, so what I did was we talked about how do you market yourself as an older person. So this is an example of that I forgot that was in here of how to improve your resume. And ChatGPT is really great for that. But again, you want to make sure it's your own words. And so this is what I had written in here before. And I don't have time. I don't have time to go through this and I'm actually going to take this slide out because it actually should have been out. But this is actually a good point. The other challenge with people my age is that our resumes, not it. So ChatGPT can really help you say some things in a much better way. So again, don't use it word for word though, because it can, people are kind of starting to know what sounds artificial, pun intended, and what does not. But it would be a good idea if you took your resume and did a run through, and that's what this is about. But I'm not doing the demo on that. Okay. All right, let's talk about some of the challenges. Age discrimination is ridiculous, okay? And honestly, there's not a way you can get around it, right? So even if they don't ask your age, when you go to fill out that W-2 information, it's there. The year you graduated college, it's there. It's there. Okay, so let me take a comment from the chat. I heard we should take graduation date. So for me, if you graduated more than 10 years, if you've not graduated within the past 10 years, I don't put a date on. That's kind of how I do that. But then you're kind of saying I've graduated more than 10 years ago. For me, it's a catch-22. Like, I don't know. What do you do about that? And to not go back too far in your work history, excuse me, that is absolutely correct. I actually go back to where I started with my data career. I don't go back further than that, but at some point I'll stop going back that far. I think it's within 10 or 15 years. I don't remember what it is, but you definitely want to be mindful of that. To me, if you were, I don't know, you were RA in college, I think you can kind of leave that off. On the other hand, if you need an opportunity to show yourself in leadership, depending on how old you are now, because you want to, if you were 1979 RA, I don't know if that will fly, but it depends. All right, so age discrimination starts at age 40. Actually, it starts at age 45. Okay. Age discrimination, 35. age discrimination starts at 35. It's kind of like hearing people call a woman who's pregnant at 40 geriatric. I mean, it just sounds ridiculous, right? But this is what it is. And this is the more updated information, okay? Now, this I had to add in here. Some things that people assume about older people, right? And I put utterly ridiculous because I think it's utterly ridiculous, okay? Inability to connect with your younger workers. I'm not even, what does that even mean, right? People typically, you come to work, how was your weekend? It was great. Maybe you played golf over the weekend and maybe they went and checked out a Wizards game. I don't know. I mean, that's just ageist in and of itself, right? So I don't really understand that part. And why the negative assumption is made. Inability to learn. Now that's just hilarious to me, because one of the things that developed as I got older was a photographic memory. I don't have any issues there. And then of course I do things, to mentally and intellectually stimulate myself, like, Sudokus and, letting my daughter beat me for the umpteenth time in Uno. But for the most part, all of this is centered around just ridiculous assumptions about people, lack of confidence. I have no idea where that one's coming from. And the inability to stay up to date with the latest technology. Okay, so what I will tell you about data is I stay in learning mode. I stay with a couple of courses that I'm working on in Udemy, because you have to stay on top of things. But that's actually also why I love the field, because I'm always having to learn something new. All right, so let's take a question. Looks like we got a couple questions here. All right, let's see. The question is, if you've only had one job for 12 years, you can still deduce it to recent years back, especially if you had title changes. You can, you can't, I mean, there are always just going to be challenges. And unfortunately, age discrimination is a big one. And tech is the most ageist thing I've ever done in my life. So I've worked in education. I've worked in, I don't know, was a clinical lab technician. I was a chemist at LabCorp. I worked as a cancer researcher. I was a fellow at the NCI, but I never went to a place that I've never seen as much ageism as I have in tech. I mean, it's just ridiculous. As in, there's certain consulting agencies that hire data professionals that if you are over 40, I don't know anybody over 40 that got a new job, as a new data professional, got a new job at one of those top consulting agencies that do data. That's just, and granted, that's anecdotal. Okay, I'll give you that. But it's also factual as far as I'm concerned. And it's okay, because there's other jobs out here. Okay, so what do you do to counter that? And I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. All right, just curious, would an employer discriminate on age and stay legally compliant? How would an employer discriminate on age and stay legally compliant? Well, they don't, it's insidious, right? So I apply for a job, I'm overqualified at a certain consultancy, and they say, oh, you're just not qualified. Or maybe they got 1,000 applicants. There's no way to prove it. And I can tell you, knowing some people that work with EEOC, age discrimination is the hardest to prove. So for me, I think at some point you get to a point where you say, I just want to be where people are cool with me. So I worked for a startup briefly. It was not a great experience. I've had much better experiences working in places where there's age diversity and other kind of diversity too, since we're on this subject, okay? The reason I've been at the company I'm at right now 4 years and I'm doing well is because it's diverse. And I think, to me, I'm just at the point in age now where it's quacking, it's a duck. Some organizations are better about diversity than others, and that's just a fact. I live in Metro DC. When I was working as a consultant, right? So one of my first data scientist jobs was as a consultant. This company had 200 people, and there were only 2 Black people, and I was one of them for a while, and then I wasn't. My point is, it's Washington, DC. If you can't have diversity in Washington, DC, you need to go back to your mission statement and rethink some things. That's absolutely, utterly impossible. Because in 2024, Black people are everywhere and we're doing everything. And how many HBCUs are in Metro DC? So the math ain't mathin', as the young people say. Go where you will be accepted and comfortable and where you can build and thrive. That is my advice. Now, you may need to start off as your, as I did, I took a job at a startup. I want to see what it was like. I know what it's like, and I have not gone back. That's all I got on that. Now, it depends on the startup too. If it was a nonprofit, it might have been a little different as it relates to age diversity. But I can tell you that my experience, age diversity is more accepted in government, nonprofit, and education. And it depends on what you do in education now. So I'm not talking about like tenure track, because they probably are ages too, but be mindful of the environments that you want to go in. I know when you're building, you got to kind of get what you want to get where you want to go, but just be mindful, okay? I'm a big person on thriving in environments where I'm being supported. So there's that. Okay, so let me just pick up another comment from the chat. They can't impress you with happy hour. Yeah, that's kind of not. Although I love video games as much as anybody, to that point about inability to connect with your younger workers. Let's see. All right. Tasha says, I think companies who prefer younger employees are looking to exploit as much as possible. That's possible too. Chaotic work hours, shifty HR practices. Excuse me. Younger people don't know how to handle, and yes, lower pay. That's probably a good point too. I didn't really think about that one. Because to me, that's like, I mean, if you start getting rid of too many of your older people, who's going to train the people coming up? So not even older, but more experienced. And the thing is that at a company that somebody's been there 12 years, that's a highly valuable person in my mind. So if you let them go, I mean, that's just not smart. And then you have no one there to train the younger people. And there was a case, not a case, but a company that was in the news a couple of years ago that had gotten rid of all of these people, and then they realized they needed them to try to hire them all back. Man, I'd have been like, I'm good, I'm out. Y'all didn't want me, I'm good. Like I said, it may be a challenge to find, but there are places out there that will support what you're doing. You just got to keep digging, and you may have to do a lot more digging than the average person because you're older, but I just want to emphasize there's a space for you in this field. This is going to be a $1 trillion industry. And if you saw Sherry's presentation about being an entrepreneur, I have been an entrepreneur for 11 years now. Now, I started off in the academic space, but I have since pivoted into a data consulting space. And once I finish my PhD, we'll see how lucrative that could be. But the bottom line is that there's a $1 trillion, probably a multiple $1 trillion industry that is data. Get your slice of the pie. That's my suggestion. And you got a network, again, BlackTIDES, that's what we all about. Okay, so have we gone through all the challenges? Yes. So how to overcome the challenges when it comes to getting interviews. I don't know how to tell you how to overcome a situation where you apply for a job and there's 1,000 applicants. I mean, like I said, tenacity and perseverance are going to be key. You just got to keep hanging in there, but networking is going to be so key. But here are some other things. You can do all the networking in the world. You can take all the certifications, but if you don't have a way to showcase your work, it doesn't matter, okay? You got to be able to say, this is what I'm capable of doing. This is what I'm bringing to the table. And one of the other little tips and tricks that I do, so there are a couple of times when I've been hired on the spot for a position, right, as a consultant. And the two jobs, two hired on the spot, the thing that they had in common, those two experiences, was that one of them was in the education sector. So I gathered some educational data similar to what they were looking at. So they had this company where they were looking to improve literacy among disadvantaged children, Hispanic speaking children, or Hispanic or Spanish speaking children. What I did was I gathered some data that I found at the U.S. Department of Education. Kaggle is another good source. Healthcare.gov is another good source. There's plenty of free data out there. So I gathered some data specific to what they were doing. I did a little mini analysis, 10 slides long, and they were like, when can you start? Okay, that's a project that, actually, I don't think it's on my GitHub page, but it used to be. And all I did it in was Excel, right? Because at this point, I don't know what languages they're using. I haven't done the interview yet, so I don't really know. So I do something basic in Excel because it's a nonprofit, and I know that nonprofits typically don't have a lot of resources. So I did it in Excel. They hired me on the spot. I did a simple analysis. I created a simple dashboard. They literally hired me on the spot. So what I'm saying is that projects can get you a long way, right? But you're like, but I got to get to the interview phase. Well, that's where GitHub and Tableau Public and having a blog or a website come in, right? So if you are on LinkedIn and you have a GitHub, any of those things, there should be some place where, a prospective employer can click on that link and go to your GitHub or go to your Tableau Public, okay? That's how you sell yourself, because these days it's all about selling. You gotta really sell yourself. It's a lot of competition. Okay, let's see. All right. I've always had gray hair, but now I'm graying more on the front. What should I do to cover the gray? This is a good conversation here. All right, so I've actually decided to start letting my gray come in, but I'm not interviewing. So somebody talking about a wig. Okay, well, my wig's name is Shirley. So when I'm interviewing, me and Shirley get down. And that's just, again, it isn't fair. It isn't right. It's what it is. And when I have to interview, I pull out Shirley. Now, I don't know that AM Hurdle has a name for her wig like I do, but I'm just saying it's my interview wig. It's my presentation wig. And then when I show up, I have my twist and my shea butter in my hair. Okay. So anyway, it's what you have to do. It's unfortunate. I used to color my hair. I just decided that I don't want to color my hair anymore, but I'm also very honest and realistic about the environment that we live in. It is what it is. I don't like it, but it's what it is. And so we need to get a job. We need to get past the interview point. And so that's what I do. Okay, so it looks like that's all I got for this meeting. And so now we have about 8 more minutes left. I want to make sure I leave time for any questions that anybody has. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Now, I just want to say that as BlackTIDES as we're thinking about what our programming is going to be next year, one of the things that we're going to focus on for next year is ChatGPT, and GitHub and project making, because I think those are 2 key skills that everyone in the job market is going to need to have. It doesn't have to be to the point of like prompt engineering per se, but you absolutely need to be familiar with those tools and how to use them. All right. Do you have preferred platforms? GitHub, Jessica, thank you. GitHub is the one that I use. Oh, it has a hard time displaying Jupyter. Really? I didn't know that. That is interesting. Well, thanks for sharing, because I had no idea. I use Tableau Public. Visualization is kind of one of the areas that's my favorite and one that I'm working to develop expertise in. And so I always share my Tableau Public. Ultimately, stakeholders don't really care what the data, reads like, but a good visualization will go a very long way. Okay, let's see what else we got with questions here. Okay, glad to have you, AM Hurdle. Okay, glad to be helpful to everybody. +1 for Tableau Public, absolutely. And even a blog, you guys, so I started a newsletter that I work on when I have time, and I don't really have a lot of time. That's another great way. I would say that as you're learning things, to learn it in real time. And I know it can be really daunting. So something that I see a lot of people do on LinkedIn is, hey, I learned how to do a pivot table. And if you've done them for a long time, you're like, wow. But then on the other hand, you're like, wow, right? Because they're putting themselves out there, they're being vulnerable. It's really hard to do. One thing you will have to do as a data professional, you're always going to have a situation where you have to explain what you're doing to someone who has no idea, or someone who thinks they have an idea, but they actually don't. Get real experience with doing that. And to me, LinkedIn or Twitter or I don't know, TikTok, whatever you want to do, to show that you're learning some things and that you can do some things more importantly. I don't know how that would translate to TikTok, but that seems to be where a lot of young people are. So I thought I would suggest it. Okay, questions towards data science, medium.com. I'm not such a big fan of Medium. I'm actually a much bigger fan of Substack for reasons, in terms of monetization, in terms of getting audiences. If Medium works for you, that's great, but I would absolutely suggest Substack would be my choice for a place to blog. Let's see, what else? Strategies for building portfolio. You can literally take an Excel sheet, do a dashboard, that's a portfolio. Nowadays, they have software where you can import things and create an automatic presentation, and then you just adjust it as you need to. So I guess what I'm really saying is that no matter what your age is, age really doesn't matter. It's how you use the tools and are you familiar with the tools. And I think what some people, older people, do is, I was whatever at a whatever company and I'm transitioning to data. Why won't they give me a job? Well, because what you did before doesn't really matter. right? Nobody cares. What they care about is, do you know how to manipulate data? Do you know how to discuss data? You know how to visualize data? Do you know how to pull data from one space, do the analysis, and then send it someplace else? Do you know how to deploy a new machine learning model? Those are the things that you need to know how to do. So in some ways, your past can help you, but you got to kind of go into it with a sense of humility and with a sense of, I'm starting over, right? And that I'm willing to learn. And please understand, there was always something to learn. Like I said, I am in the middle of a Neo4j class and it's great. So that desire to learn, those 4 fundamental things you need, that portfolio, those are things that will get attention to yourself. The things that I didn't have 11 years ago was Twitter and Facebook, and maybe Facebook was out, I just didn't know it. But my point is that there's just no reason not to get yourself out there with what you're trying to do. Be loud and public about it. Hey, I'm transitioning into a data career. Anybody have any, any suggestions, because again, a lot of jobs are word of mouth. They're not even advertised. So get to know the people that you need to know, get your skill set together, get your portfolio together, stay encouraged, join BlackTIDES Data for upcoming programming for the next year about ChatGPT and networking and things like that. And that's how you get there. Okay, so thank you, Sia, for dropping the survey, because I certainly forgot. So you guys, if you could please fill out the survey. We take all of the suggestions with humility and with the goal of improving what we do so that we can share with other groups, or we share with, among our groups, and then make what we do better. Any other questions? Okay, can you talk about extensive requests for free work during the, okay, yeah, let me just spend a few seconds on this. This is a catch-22 as well, because you know that if you don't do it, they won't hire you. So what do? I have a rule not to. Now, I'm 10 years in, okay? If I'm starting out, I might be doing what I got to do. Now, that might not be what anyone else tells you, but it's unfortunate that it's like that, but it depends on the extent of the work as well, right? So actually, this happened to me a couple of years ago, I think. There was an assignment. I did what I could of the assignment, and then the rest of it was like, okay, you guys really want me to code for this machine learning model, give you all the code, and then to deploy it, you literally could take it and do what you want with it. I stopped. So I had a line, right? That of where I was not willing to go. And needless to say, I didn't get the job, and it was cool because I already had a job. So, and that's the other thing, look for a job while you have one, and go from there. Okay, so someone wants to know about the slide deck. It'll be available at a later date, again, along with the video. I forget, Sia. Hey, Sia, thank you for piping in, because I don't know what to do about that.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I meant to say that you have also used a presentation. You'll have like a project on the side that you did. And if you just like do it to them before they do it to you, as you present your dope project and say, hey, look what I can do. So you don't have to do all that sometimes.
That's a super great point, Sia. Get ahead of it. So apply for a job. When you set up the interview, send them a copy of some presentation you did. Again, it's got to be specific to the industry. I think that's helpful. So if you're applying for a job in the financial sector, but you send them a presentation you did on some crab genetics, I don't think that's going to fly. Okay. So that's actually Sia, I love that idea. Thank you for joining. Sia is our operations lead and also equivalent to the vice president of BlackTIDES Data. Yeah, get ahead of it. Send them something before they send you something. That's exactly what I would do. That's actually a great idea, Sia. Thank you for sharing that. That's something that if I'm out there again, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Right. So once you confirm your interview, I would say, hey, ahead of our interview, I just want to send this presentation that I threw together. And then that way, if they kind of come back, well, we want you to answer this. I'm like, yeah, okay, I already sent y'all something. So that'll be a different situation. Okay, looks like we got one more question. Be careful with this. Let's see, what was it? Can you talk about extensive requests and how do you protect your IP? Be careful with this. The time, place. Okay, so Jessica Burns, be careful with this. At the place where I am in my career, and I refuse to do them. I can see my portfolio and they can see my portfolio and decide if they want me or not. Also, one place put me through 6 interviews with 2 coding projects for 2 positions, and they ghosted me. And then 3 months later said I wasn't qualified with no additional information. Yeah, and I've heard about people having their stuff actually be deployed and used like for some marketing. Like the worst story I've heard about was a young lady interviewing, and let me be clear about this. It seemed like this happened to a lot of women, okay? All right, so anyway, so young lady, she does this thing for some company. They use her marketing campaign. Like she's looking on TV, seeing her stuff. And stuff is not the word I wanted to use, okay? That would just, that would really be terrible. So yeah, you got to be mindful of that. But again, I think if you create a project, kind of come prepared like with a mini project based on what you're interviewing for, that'll be helpful. And then you're like, okay, well, I can't do but so many things. I think people need to be SMEs, but you know, there's no diss if you want to be a generalist, right? I say find an area to concentrate in. That way, when I create this education presentation, I ain't got to make 15 because I'm, you know, it's the same industry. I'm interviewing for jobs in the same industry. But if you're trying to bounce around a lot of different industries, personally, I think it's important to find your niche and work that. And I think that's something else that Sherry talked about, niche. I think it's super important in data. Okay, we are a little bit over time. All right, Jared's here. We got some famous former BlackTIDES members. He's our mentor now. Hey, Jared. Jared's also a professor. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to wrap this up again. Thank you all for joining us for Black and Data Week. Be sure to join us for some of our other presentations. We have a very great week planned. Thank you for joining. And if you have any other questions, feel free to drop us an email. I think our information is available.